A few hours earlier, 131 hours remain. Nomus of every size were overtaking the room, the walls, the roof, and the floors around them. Liquid and glass shards continued to spray in different directions as Nomus burst from their containment tubes. The huddle of students prepared for the incoming wave of disaster, each with their own unique abilities prepared. After a few moments of the horde circling them, a few Nomu started advancing towards the students. Todoroki fired repeated ice barrages and walls of flames towards the incoming Nomu, as Kirishima advanced just enough to take on any other smaller Nomu in a fist battle. Aim for the brain, Momo called out, fending against one of the smaller Nomu with her staff and spear. That's the only possible weak spot we can guess at a glance. Can we get out from where we came? Kirishima called out, jumping over a fist and striking a large Nomu in the exposed brain. They're blocking the exit. Ochako yelled as she dodged multiple attacks, touching any Nomu that got close, letting them float away. Mina skated around, athletically jumping and skating around Nomu, burning their joints and brains until they couldn't move or brains had shut off from the melting damage. There's no other way out, that's obvious. Mina shouted as she skated under a Nomu. Momo, who was still fending off with her staff, racked her brain for any solution they had. She glanced at the door and then to all of her classmates, who were fending off Nomus as best they could. She looked up at the roof. Many Nomu, who were not up there by force from Ochako, were still preparing to jump down to fight. They could be overrun at any given moment. Not to mention, if they did this wrong, they could potentially lead the Nomus into the streets to run ramped. Momo pushed a Nomu back with her pole and looked towards an icing Todoroki. There was only one way. Shoto, Momo screamed. Todoroki looked back at his loved one. I need time. Todoroki gritted his teeth, bearing through the icy pain as he aimed his right hand at Momo and shot a barrier of ice around her, shielding her from the onslaught of Nomu temporarily. Momo looked around through the barely visible ice. She exhaled, her breath visible as she gritted her own shivering teeth. She threw off her shirt entirely, leaving her in just a bra as her complete upper half started glowing around her, sweat dripping from her forehead. Outside the dome of ice, the rest of the students were being outmatched. Hiroshima was being pounded by three Nomu, the hardened skin around him cracking. Todoroki was pushing himself to the limit, firing ice and flames from both sides, leaving him unable to move as he fired, the ice creeping up his right, the burns creeping on his left. Ochako was flying around the room avoiding any Nomus on the ground. However, the ones on the roof were doing their best to attack her from above. And Mina had been knocked into the wall, having been hit from her side. The rest of the Nomu were starting to cave in, advancing towards them. Ochako looked at the brutal scene around them. This was it, they were done for. Izuku. I'm sorry, Ochako thought to herself as a Nomu from the roof she had floated punched her back, slamming her down into the ground. Ochako laid there as she coughed, trying to catch the wind that had been knocked out of her. She really was going to die here. However, even with those thoughts in her mind, her hand crept up towards the metal faceguard still wrapped around her neck. Ochako yelled her battle cry, readying her stance to go down fighting before the horde of Nomu, before hearing the words of Momo through the ice. Now. The ice dome shone brightly before the group heard what sounded like an explosion. The force of the blow knocked the Nomus and the students back a bit, the ice dome shattering around them. There Momo stood, shirtless, freezing, and completely tired with one of the largest cannons they had ever seen her make. While the Nomu are disoriented, Momo yelled, tiredly, "Come on!" Ochako ran and grabbed Mina, helping her up and floating them both towards the cannon. Hiroshima pushed the Nomu off him and ran, and Todoroki fired himself off the ground with ice. Each circled the cannon ready to hear the plan, and the purple and brained mobs started circling again. Momo, her legs giving way, held up a bomb. "It's the only way," she said. The group nodded. Mina nodded. With a final explosion, Momo fired the oversized cannon, the cannonball firing through the roof. The force of the cannonball made its way through the ground and through the old hospital, shooting out from the old hospital's roof. A path upwards had been created. Ochako. Ochako touched every person before they all jumped, floating their way through the hole. Shoto. Everyone grabbed onto Todoroki as he aimed his left downward. Plus, Ultra. Todoroki shouted as fire the power of a jet shot from his arm and hand, burning the Nomu climbing after them, while also shooting them faster up the hole. The group shot through the ground, up through the hospital, exiting from the roof the cannonball had shot out off. Momo. Mina called out. Momo set the bomb, the beeping now going off. Momo dropped the bomb, allowing it to fall back through the hole. The explosion could be heard from miles, even if most of it was underground. The hospital violently shook before the entire building came crashing down on itself. Ochako couldn't help but frown. "Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad. Momo. What now?" Hiroshima started to call out, however, Momo had passed out. We have to land," Todoroki said tiredly. Ochako released as Todoroki made an ice slide for them to slide back down on, everyone crashing back down into the snow. Todoroki held Momo in his arms as they sat in the snow, Hiroshima holding Mina and Ochako sitting alone, holding the metal face guard. "We have to warn the teachers. There's so much going on," Hiroshima said. Ochako nodded as she made to stand, however, a few sounds made everyone freeze. In the very far distance, they could hear it, the sounds of explosions and air pressure being fired from the mountain tops. The weight grew in everyone's chest. Ochako slowly turned to face the misty mountain tops miles away, her eyes wide and her pupils dilated with fear. Izuku and Bakugo were fighting. She turned her head towards the group who stared back at her. "I gotta go," she said as she turned towards the mountains. Mina, however, stood and limped over to her friend, grabbing her shoulder. "Not without us." "But what about the mission? The teachers need to know," Ochako argued. However, Todoroki coughed and spoke up. "Shigaraki has a few days of surgery on him. We have time. Midoriya has no time left. He's now of top importance," he said, forcing himself up, holding Momo. "We'll drop Momo off at the apartment and fly our way towards the mountain. It'll take us a few hours. I believe in Midoriya and Bakugo to hold whoever they're fighting off for that long." Ochako nodded. Quote dot. "Then let's go. I'm coming, Izuku. Don't you dare get captured. Asterisk 130 hours remain." The storm had passed as the students zero gravities their way up the mountain, having left Momo at the apartment to rest. She would contact the teachers when she awoke. "I haven't heard anything go off in a few hours," Hiroshima said nervously as they flew. "You don't think?" "No," Ochako yelled back. "Izuku and Bakugo wouldn't lose that easy." I'm sure they either won or have them in a standoff. I hope you're right, Todoroki said. If they worked together then they would have a chance. I bet you they did. Ochako said to herself. After that talk with Bakugo, they had to have worked together. Oi, down there, Kirishima called out. A body was laying in the snow. Ochako released as the four crashed down to the snow. The sun had started showing now, the snowstorm passing. They ran towards the body, however, each looked shocked when they arrived. Mina covered her hand over her mouth as the others stared down. Bakugo was beaten this badly. Kirishima said, crouching down and feeling for a pulse. He's alive, but barely. He must have fallen from pretty high. Guys, look around, Mina said. The group looked around noticing the damage of broken trees and pushed back mounds of snow. These aren't damages from explosions. This is Midoriya. Todoroki said. Ochako's chest felt even heavier than before. Izuku pushed himself again. Guys, Kirishima called out, pointing up there. They all looked up to see a man, holding three bodies, jumping off into the distance. Izuku, Eri, Hima, Ochako screamed. Guys, right, we'll come back for Bakugo. Todoroki yelled back. Ochako touched each one, all grabbing onto Todoroki as he used his left to fire them into the sky, chasing after the trench-coated man. Ochako gritted her teeth almost cracking under the pressure. No, Izuku wouldn't be lost, nor Eri, nor Hima. She would get her family back. No matter what. *125 hours remain.